Hello, thanks for clicking on. This is Delia. so, um, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about PTSD and other reoccurring loops we find ourselves in. There's lots of different causes of PTSD and different kinds of trauma. And there's a wonderful book called The Body Keeps Score by a man whose name I can't remember at the moment. But if you go to Amazon or Google The Body Keeps Score, you'll find the book. If you want an academic understanding or more information, it's really great. Very valid, very solid information about how the body ingests trauma and different things, different energies, different things that happen. He's an academician. He really knows his stuff. He really knows what this is about. So go read his book if you want that particular kind of energy, that kind of information about PTSD and these emotional loops that we find ourselves in. They're biochemical. They're way below, above, around, however you want to call it, psychology. So there's a lot of different kinds of psychology and lots of different kinds of therapy and lots of different ways of doing cognitive work, and that's great. I have benefited from many of them. And in the most recent times, though, energy work has been really doing it for me for, I don't know, 20 years or so, a long time. And as I've been kind of coming down this new path of more energy work, it's really clear to me that we are in a culture that requires us to put things into words. And I'm a poet. I started writing, in 1968 or something like that. And I've written every day since. And my family really required words. Words get us recognition. That's what makes us smart or not smart. And that gets the grades and the jobs and the careers. It gets a lot. Words get a lot. And not all bodies are wordy. A lot, some bodies are picturey, and some bodies are sensory. And even picturey bodies and sensory bodies are required to come up with words. I remember being a kid when I started writing and really kind of taking up the mantle of my job, my goal, my spiritual mission in life was to, as a poet, was to name the unnameable, to describe things that people didn't have words for. And I really, really, really applied myself to that. And there's a lot of great uses for words, and words do a lot of really great things, and thinking does a lot of really great stuff. But words and thinking are not the only intelligences that we have. And that really gets pushed aside quite a bit. And we keep going back to words and thinking as, the ace in the hole, or I like to think of, especially thinking, I enjoy thinking. I love ideas. I love imagination. I love unusual combinations of things. There's just a lot of stuff about thinking that I really enjoy, and ideas, the world of ideas. And what I love more is freedom and possibilities. So when you're when you're thinking about healing or about changing, because healing is just another way of changing, it's just another spelling, and you have PTSD and these reoccurring loops, it it's confusing because your brain knows better. You have read the books, you're smart, you think, you know things, and you are cognizant of stuff. And when that PTSD or the other loops get kicked on, you're on a railroad ride. You can't get off of it. And a benign way of describing it is, when you've had too much coffee, there's no way you can get the coffee out of your system. You really just have to wait. You just have to ride it out. And that becomes less of a hell when you realize that it's probably best that you don't believe everything that you're thinking when you're in that state. And that's true for all the loops, any of the loops that we can be in. They get more painful when we think that what we're thinking is real, is true. What you're thinking in those times feels true. It's the emotional truth of the moment, but it's not the truth of, okay, I need to pack up my life and sell my house and move and live, in a Winnebago or something. It's something that you want to ride out usually. The mechanics of the PTSD and these loops is that we are biochemical beings as well as electromagnetic. We're taught that we're biochemical beings. I mean, there's a whole pharmaceutical industry based on it. And everybody knows that body chemistry means something or other. And usually they only reference it because they have a pill to change the biochemistry. But a way to understand, like PTSD, for instance, is that there is a trigger, and then your body chemistry takes over. There's an alarm, the switch that's tripped, and then the peptide cascades. They do this thing, and the body chemistry does that thing, and there's just a whole lot of stuff that's going on that thinking can't access. You can't. Have you ever thought about your stomach acid? Like, I need more stomach acid now. I need less stomach acid now. It's almost like some of the autonomic. I can't say. My mouth can't say the word right now. But the biochemical and processes of the body, it's on a different dimension than your thinker-talker. And your thinker-talker can't affect how your biochemistry works directly. You can't say, I need more hormones now. That's not how it works. What you think and how you believe does affect those things, and those things affect how you think and believe. But it's not mechanical. So it's not like flipping a switch and the lights go on. It's different. So it's good to notice. And I've had this experience myself, and I've talked to a lot of different people who've had or have PTSD and these different loops. And one of the things that you can do is start to be more aware. Usually what happens is the loop kicks off, the cycle starts, and we go into panic, or we go into resistance, or we get into alignment and agreement with whatever it is. And yeah, this is bad, and we got to change, and whatever the deal is. So if you have that moment of awareness that a cycle is kicked off, something feels very familiar, something sounds very familiar. There's a, you might have something in the pit of your stomach, or you might have some kind of a headache. But as soon as that cognizance comes up about, oh, I recognize this, I've been here before, this is familiar. In that moment, you can do some things differently. So in the beginning, you may not be able to stop the cycle. You may not be able to stop yourself from getting on the train and being on that track throughout the round. But what you can do is you can start to be more on your side. So when the familiar thing kicks off, you can identify, you can validate for yourself that this is very familiar. I think I know what this is. I think I'm in reruns, right? Remember reruns well, now you can watch everything again and again on YouTube and all that stuff. But when you're redoing something, you can start to, like pat the body, right? I say pat the body because it sounds better than rub your leg. But it's this friendly kind of motion where you're actually being a presence in one of the body's first languages, which is touch. And you can actually say things like, good body, good body. And then you can start to bring yourself into present time. So when you're in a loop, you're not now. You're in the past. So you can pat the body. You've identified that something familiar is happening, and the train is leaving. But in the meantime, you're going to be on your side, good body. And then you can start to just be wherever you are, look around the room and notice 5 things that you can see, and 4 things that you can touch, right? You can touch different things. And then 3 things that you can hear, maybe. And then 2 things that you can, smell. And 1 thing you can taste. So you just want to go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 with your senses to bring yourself into this moment. Now, the first time you do this, it may be a great breakthrough and you're done forever. And the first time you do this, it might be that you barely make it from 5 to 1. Or it could be that you don't get that far. It could be that you just get to the pat the body part before the train leaves and you're off on the loop. The more you come into that moment, when you have that moment, that space of possibility, the more you come into that, the easier it's going to be next time for you to come into that. So maybe the first time you can only come into the moment just enough to be aware that this is familiar. And then the train leaves and you're on the loop again. Well, then really celebrate that you noticed it before it happened. It's like, wait a minute, I was there, because that's huge, huge. And then another time, you may have the awareness, oh, this is familiar. And that time you may get to actually pat the body and, start to look around the room, and then you're off again. In a lot of the times, in a lot of places in our lives, we score points, right? And we're always keeping score. It's not very useful unless you're on a playing field or in the middle of an actual game. But as a way of monitoring your life and participating in your life, it's not a good model. So I recommend that you don't score yourself for how much you can get into your body this time, or how little, or how, that kind of scoring is not very helpful. What is helpful is celebrating whatever you can do. Celebrate whatever you did do, like it's a big deal, because it is a big deal. If you're able to come into your body and recognize that this has happened before, and this is the loop that's starting, and okay, body, I'm on. We're here, and we're in this together. And then you're off and running. That's huge. That's huge. And the more you interrupt the cycle, the more your body starts to acclimate. I call this migrating normal. Big changes are hard and not necessarily useful. But if you migrate a little, baby steps at a time, or steps that you're comfortable making at a time, then you actually can make the changes that you're integrating the change. You're organically changing, as opposed to kind of thrusting change upon you, so to speak. That's much harder to keep, because it's not authentic. And this celebrating your every step is really, really organic and authentic and sustainable and fun. The more you do it, the more fun it is. And it's a thing that all my clients and students over the years, this validating yourself is a thing that everybody has the most trouble with. Partly because our culture is not geared that way. It's geared towards, overinflating ourselves, or completely obliterating ourselves, but not a natural, organic, healthy growth. So when you have the loops, or you have the PTSD, you want to validate that it is something. And you also want to validate that you're something too. And there are tools and ways of thinking about things that are not in the mainstream, that are not in the Time Warner version of the world, as I like to call it. And the more you start to participate in these new ways with what's happening with you, within your body, within your psyche, then you can start to really make some remarkable changes and become more comfortable in your own body than had previously been thought possible. So we can talk about PTSD and the loops more at another time, but I think this is a good amount to start with. So there's some tools that we've talked about here today. One is when you start to notice something familiar is happening. You may notice that your breathing is shallow. You may notice that your hypervigilance has gone up off the charts. You may notice that you're very anxious, or maybe you're shaking. All of the things that your body is doing is transmitting to you that there's danger, and that something bad is about to happen, basically. And it's a rerun. Unless it's happening right now, in which case it would be a different thing. It wouldn't be a post-traumatic stress. It would be a current stress, right? So if it's a bad thing that's happening right in this moment, the biochemistry is going to say, what's the best thing for us here? Do we fight, or do we flee, or do we freeze? What's going to create the greatest force? What's going to be the safest thing? So that's what happens when we're live. And when we're in this rerun thing, it's the post version of it. And the truth is that in this moment, you have everything that you need. There's plenty of oxygen to breathe. You have access to food and water and shelter. In this moment, even if you're in a treacherous situation, there's hurricanes, there's earthquakes, there's War is all around the world. If you're in a bad situation, then do the thing that is called for in the moment. Get yourself to safety. Take the action steps. And that way you're participating live in what's happening, which is what's required. If, however, you're in a physically safe space and an old familiarity comes up, and you find yourself replaying that horrible thing that happened in 1982 again, that's the time to be kind to you, right? So your body is replaying it on purpose. Its desire is to either get you safe or get this stuff healed and released. And for healing and releasing, it has to come up and out through consciousness. So that's why it's coming up and out. So when something comes up, you want to pat the body, you want to look around the room, you want to do the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 with your senses. Rub your body, be communicative in its vocabulary, touch. And you want to just really reassure yourself that right here, right now, you're safe. You can use today's date. Using today's date is very, very helpful. You can use the time and date if you want to. But just pulling yourself, having the intention of bringing yourself into present time. Because the more you interrupt the cycle, because it's an automatic cycle. Once there's a trigger, it's just automatic, right? So the more that you interrupt it, even if it's just for a millisecond at the beginning or 2 milliseconds, or maybe the cycle goes off and then you're cognizant, you kind of pop out of it for a minute and you touch your body and you look at the room and then it starts up again. The more you're interrupting the cycle, the more you're bringing the cycle into present time. It's very powerful. It's very potent. And the more you do it, the more you do it, the more you get it done. So be kind to you. Be on your side. Assume intelligence in your system instead of stupidity. The world will tell you that it tells you a bunch of nonsense. But instead of believing what the world has to say, just believe, try it on. Don't believe it, don't take my word for it. But try on the idea that the way you are designed is genius and brilliant instead of how the world says, because the world is kind of nutty right now. So assume your intelligence, not your cognitive intelligence, but your whole innate intelligence and wisdom and generosity and divine goodness. Just assume all of those things are true. And what if there are parts of you that are actually trying to help you that you've never even thought of before? And just see what happens. Just see what happens. So thanks for clicking on, and I hope that you'll try this at home and then leave me a comment and let me know how it's going for you. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks. Bye.